So on May 27th, we got yet another story of George H.W. Bush being hospitalized, and this time he was hospitalized in Maine. And what I've been documenting a whole lot lately is there's been lots of 9/11 symbolism that has been going on in the mainstream media, and you might not understand it if you don't understand what I'm going to talk about in this video, which is called gematria, the practice of coding numbers into words and phrases. And people such as George Bush, they all understand this knowledge and they've been using it to rule over us. Our mainstream media is coded with this code. Our told history is coded with this code. Our sports leagues are scripted with this code. So just check out some links in the description. You'll understand more of what I'm talking about and it will make a lot more sense. I have thousands of videos showing the same thing over and over. And lots of things I've been really close to figuring out what is coming up. I even just recently talked about the death of a astronaut that was in the moon missions, and then we just got the death of Alan Bean, the fourth guy to walk on the moon. So anyway, what's interesting about all of this George Bush stuff, we just had the death of Barbara Bush, and Barbara Bush's birthday is on 6/8. And this number was really big in 9/11. Her son, who was the president, his birthday was 68 days before 9/11. And also, World Trade Center construction began in the year 68 on August 6th, which in most parts of the world, they even write the date, 6/8 of 68, right? 68. Also, that was the year George Bush graduated Yale Skull and Bones. It was the year 911 was made the emergency dialing number in the year 1968. Ooh, what's that? But also, now I'm losing my train of thought here. 1968 was 33 years before the World Trade Centers were supposedly slammed in with the plane, right? 33 years. And in gematria, if you write out 33, it equals 156. And they were opened for 28 years, and if you write out 28, it equals 156. And that's significant because the 156 prime number just so happens to be 9/11. So, and there's more that can go along with it, but, just interesting that her birthday would be 6/8, a number that is special to 9/11. And then she dies this year. Now, George H.W. Bush possibly will die this year as well. And just think about his New World Order speech on 9/11 of 1990. That was 11 years to the day before 9/11 happened. He gave a speech about the New World Order. And he's super duper connected to 9/11. Even he's the 41st president, so they call him Bush 41. And 9/11 happened on a date numerology of 41. Al-Qaeda equals 41. Airplanes equal 41, It's an important number. Even the Yankees even upset the 116-win Mariners that season just after 9/11. 41 days after 9/11, they upset the Mariners to make the World Series. Seattle Mariners equals 179, the 41st prime number. So, just know he's really connected. I'm going to show you a whole bunch in regards to the Pentagon and George H.W. Bush as well. But when I looked him up, look at his birthday, June 12th. June 12th is this really big day that we've talked a lot about, has been important this year. That's the day that Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un are supposed to meet, right? And we had the Valentine's Day Massacre. Valentine equals 612. And that Valentine's Day Massacre happened 612 days after the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, the same area. And that one happened on 6/12. And then Prince Harry just got married. And remember, just before the Pulse nightclub shooting, the Invictus games that Prince Harry invented or created were in Orlando. So a lot of this stuff is synced back up to this number 612. George Bush born on 6/12. Also, David Rockefeller, his birthday was 6/12. He's the guy who proposed the World Trade Centers. And it was approved by Nelson Rockefeller, right? So proposed and approved by a Rockefeller. The word Rockefeller equals 110 in gematria. The World Trade Centers were 110 stories tall. Osama bin Laden equals 110. I think if you write out 911, it equals 110. The Pentagon has Highway 110 next to it. The word president equals 110. Significant number. I've also talked a lot about the moon symbolism that goes along with this number 612 and how it's connected to Korea and also Hawaii. Hawaii, its 59th anniversary of being a state, was even on the Great American Eclipse Day. And then think about South Korea's president named Moon Jae-in, right? Moon. So there's lots of stuff going on with this number. So it's really important that he was born on the date of 6/12. And in regards to 6/8, that was the date of the last eclipse in the year 1918, the last total eclipse that went over the United States. It was on 6/8, 156 days before World War I came to an end. So yet again, that 156 number, which is 156 prime, is 9/11. So there's been lots of 9/11 symbolism, but let's move on a little bit here. So, well, what else is interesting? That George H.W. Bush equals 138, just like Donald Trump. So that's pretty fitting for right now, Donald Trump being the president. Something that I talked about in 2015 was that I thought George Bush and Jimmy Carter would both possibly die at the age of 93. And I'll explain that in a second. But if you notice, they were born in the same year, 1924. And with the end date, they were born 112 days apart. And Barbara Bush died in Houston, that equals 112. Then George Bush was hospitalized in Houston just, a couple weeks after that. 112 is also the emergency dialing code in other parts of the world. Instead of 911, they use 112. So interesting, him and Jimmy Carter are both 93 years old, and they're born 112 days apart. And I'll leave a link in the description about the Cuban plane crash that happened on 18/5, but that had 9/11 symbolism in it as well. And the reason that Jimmy Carter is so interesting is because Obama was the first president in 88 years to go to Cuba. Calvin Coolidge was the last acting president to go, and Calvin Coolidge equals 88, and Obama went 88 years later, a bunch of other stuff. But Jimmy Carter was actually the last president to go to Cuba before Obama. He wasn't the president at the time, but he was the last president before Obama to go there. So there's something significant about Cuba with Jimmy Carter and that Cuban plane crash. And remember, too, in regards to 9/11, we had the Las Vegas shooting that was the worst mass shooting in the United States, or the worst, I wrote mass shooting. I don't know why I wrote mass shooting, but it was the worst terrorist attack within the United States since 9/11. And that was on Jimmy Carter's birthday, his 93rd birthday. So just think about that yet again in regards to 9/11 symbolism. In 2015, what I was talking about, though, was Bush and Carter would possibly die at the age of 93, because I just noticed this pattern with all these presidents of late, like Gerald Ford. He died at the age of 93. Ronald Reagan died at the age of 93. And then in regards to 9/11, there was the 93 World Trade Center attack. George Bush, he was the president until the year 1993. And then in 9/11, we had Flight 93. It supposedly hit, the 93rd floor and all that. So there's lots of 93 stuff going on. We're being told now that he's been in the hospital in Maine. Maine equals 93. Barbara Bush equals 93. And we got all them stories with Southwest. Think about airplanes yet again in regards to 9/11 symbolism. But the girl on that Southwest airline that died, her name was Jennifer Reardon, and she died the same day as Barbara Bush. And that was 93 days after Dolores O'Riordan of the band The Cranberries, right? And that song, Zombie, that they're most famous for, was about the Warrington bomb attacks that happened on the same day as the 93 World Trade Center attack. on February 26th of 93. So we got the death of her, and then they bring back the girl on a Southwest flight with a name that looks a lot like hers. She dies 93 days after her, and her famous song is on the same day of the 93 World Trade Center attacks, or that's what it's about. So just think about all that. And Jennifer, the girl on this plane thing, her it was in Southwest, but she was from New Mexico. And think about the Santa Fe shooting in Houston. Santa Fe reminds us of Mexico. New Mexico, then Barbara Bush dying in Houston. Then George Bush goes to a hospital in Houston. We got the Houston Rockets in the NBA Finals. Also, Southwest equals 93, right? The word Saturn equals 93. And 9/11 has a lot to do with Saturn, a lot to do with Israel, who's all about Saturn. So, without the end date, Bush and Carter are born 111 days apart, which is also interesting because 9/11 is the day that leaves 111 days of the year. But think about it, not necessarily 111, but just the number 11. And Bush gave the speech 11 years before the World Trade Center attacks happened. In the 11th state, on the 11th day, the buildings that got hit looked like a giant 11, and the first plane to hit was flight AA-11. A is the first letter, so a lot like 1111. And then think about that in regards to World War I coming to an end 156 days after the last total solar eclipse on 6/8 in 1918. World War I came to an end on 11/11 at 11. So it's definitely super significant to what I'm talking about, and it is connected to that moon theme. Also, in 2015, remember we got the Roseburg, Oregon shooting at the college on Jimmy Carter's birthday, and that's the day that leaves 91 days in the year. Think about it. The Las Vegas was the Harvest 91 Route 91 festival, right? On the day that leaves 91 days of the year. Much, much more, but his birthday is the day that leaves 91 days of the year. George Bush's birthday is 91 days before 9/11. And it's also 9 months and 1 day after 9/11. So, significant number, 91. 91 is the year of the Cold War supposedly came to an end. So, what's even more interesting here is that George Bush, he gave that speech on 9/11 of 1990, which was 11 years before it happened. But when 9/11 happened, George Bush was 77 years old. And that was a huge number in 9/11. He was 77 years old. World Trade Center equals 77. September 11th equals 77. Remember, Flight 77 hit the 77-foot tall Pentagon exactly 77 minutes after takeoff. Then the Pentagon is on the 77th meridian. And George Bush was, 77 years old. And he was even the director of the CIA until the year 77. And if you look up on Google Maps, it says that the old CIA headquarters is even 11 minutes away from the Pentagon. Oh, the odds, 11 minutes. And then just think about the new director of the CIA being hired, Gina Haspel. Her full name equals 135. She was elected on 13/5. Central Intelligence Agency equals 135. And the CIA headquarters is named after George Bush, who might possibly die at the age of 93 within if he dies in the next few days. Maybe he won't die. But, you just can't make all this up. We get a new director of the CIA, and George Bush was, the thing is named after him, but he was that till 77. He was 77 when 9/11 happened. 11 years before, then the 11th state, the buildings look like an 11. We'll look and see what it says on Google Maps, because maybe it doesn't say that anymore. That's what it said yesterday. I looked it up, and I didn't take a screenshot of it. I just want to make sure. The Pentagon. We'll go to CIA. Original headquarters. Well, now it says 14 minutes, but the other day I looked it up, it said 11 minutes. So, maybe due to traffic or something. But Just interesting, the other day when I looked it up, it said 11 minutes. And interesting that it's that close to the Pentagon, and everything about him is the number 77. So the Pentagon also equals 510 in Satanic, which is a big number I've talked about with Korea, like no other. Korea equals 510. Moon Jae-in, he became the president of South Korea on 510. Kim Jong-un killed his brother in Malaysia, and his brother's birthday was 510. The word basketball equals 510. Think about Dennis Rodman and the basketball diplomacy in Korea equals 510. Also, Peace Summit equals 510. So, and that was the day that May 10th was also the day that Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un announced they were going to be having a meeting in Singapore. So, lots of 9/11 symbolism. I wonder if George Bush is going to die at the age of 93. If he does, then possibly Jimmy Carter is going to die at the age of 93, just like I talked about possibly happening in 2015, which is dumb because everything I've been talking about how it's all goes back to the year 2015. Everything I talked about in 2015 just seemingly keeps coming back up in the mainstream media. Even the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers, lots of symbolism to them. So I've been saying it's Rockets Cavs. That's what I've been saying all year. But if it is the Warriors, the Warriors in 2015 were really connected to the Valentine's Day, and then we had the Valentine's Day shooting this year. They even won the NBA Finals 122 days after Valentine's Day in 2015. Golden State equals 122. But it was all connected to Teen Wolf stuff. In the NBA All-Star Week, there was the Teen Wolf won the Slam Dunk contest, and Andrew Wiggins, the Teen Wolf, won the Rising Star Challenge MVP. Lots of Teen Wolf stuff. And the Minnesota Timberwolves made the playoffs this year for the first time in a bunch of years, and they opened it up playing against the Houston Rockets. So I think the Rockets are the team, but gonna end the video there. Just wanted to show all this 9/11 symbolism connected to George Bush and the death of his wife. So something really significant, that Cuban plane crash, all the Cold War symbolism with Donald Trump, North Korea, Russia, Cuba. The odds that David Rockefeller would be born on the same day as George Bush. David Rockefeller just died, in 2017 at the age of 101. Jimmy Carter's birthday, 10/1, the 26th prime. So, have a good one. Peace.